We talked quite a lot about what we thought work was, and although we did talk about some key, well, actually, I think I kept naming some skills. We actually had more certain things like flexibility, resilience, curiosity, creativity, those sorts of things, persistence. We ended up having a big conversation about around two main areas, at least from my perspective. One was to do with how do you define a skill? To what extent is a skill embedded in content? So Mark was saying that the heuristics involved in mathematics have to be learned. They may, having learned the heuristics successfully, you are then skillful in transferring potentially what you've learned there into new contexts within mathematics and outside of mathematics. So he was also arguing that it was possible to make that transfer. So we had a big debate about, are we talking about skills which somehow lay across the top of everything we do? Or are we talking about something which is in capabilities which are embedded? And we didn't really resolve that. So that was one area of debate. And then another area of debate was around digital identity and how authentic digital identity outside and inside the workplace interface. So what sorts of issues are there to do with what you reveal, what's private, what's public, what's appropriate? And we, as a consequence of that quite wide-ranging discussion, we wondered whether one of the skills we actually need in the future world of work is a capacity to manage our images appropriately, manage the image of ourselves appropriately.
We discussed appropriateness of behaviors as avatars or robots, and how that in itself is a skill that should be considered. And what's needed is really more of a culture of appropriateness embedded in schools, which you're not going to get it, so far as they're restricting access to anything bad, not really teaching all the different nuances of how to behave online, to families who don't yet understand what's out there and what's happening, to even in the workplace. There's not a lot, while there's some policy, there's not yet an online culture within the workplace.
I think also this whole thing about what's private, what's public. And somebody said to me the other day, well, everything now that was private is now public, and everything that was public is now private. So it's all kind of, so it's like everything's completely turned on its head. So that's been making me think a bit. I'm trying to get my head around that at the moment. So the traditional careers advisors got kind of bad press around it, and actually it's still quite traditional. And often they are stuck in schools where they're not given additional training because they're not going to get extra points with that school. And so how are they meant to keep up with what's happening?
I'm a STEM ambassador for think tank Birmingham Science Museum. So I go there to the museum, we use their labs, bring in students, and often with my background in science and technology and my application in the arts, we sort of have discussions, do workshops that kind of bring these two fields together to inspire the kids. Bringing the kids together, that costs money. It's that sort of infrastructure. Where now are we going to get the money to keep those sorts of activities going? Because those activities certainly don't happen, in my experience as a parent, in primary and, well, now I'm going to get to experience secondary education in this country. And for me, that's a big issue.
What we have got is 10 years, almost 10 years of government funding in supporting the kind of partnership work that you're talking about, the sort of inspirational opportunities to work with somebody who's passionate about what they do and knows a lot about it, either off-site or on-site, either within the school or outside of it. Although the funding will go for that, Creative Partnerships as an organisation is going, and Creative Partnerships, although it worked with a third of all schools in England, it was only a third of all schools, and it wasn't every student in all of those schools, and it wasn't consistently over time for all of those schools. There was a sort of touch. There is a huge amount of expertise, interest, excitement, and belief in, and also evidence about what those kinds of activities have been able to do. And I think, although there isn't going to be the same level of funding as there was, it may be that we can think creatively about how to keep it going, because it was certainly valuable.
So I'm just going to offer a few thoughts, and then I'll let you all chip in. I think there are sort of a couple of things that came through really clearly about the importance of integrating what we know about wider learning into the curriculum and accredited courses. Schools will fundamentally not sustainably pay for on anything like the scale we want to see, the sort of learning going on, unless it's tied to whether it's BTECs or international baccalaureate or whatever the hook is that we need to do this, and that is going to be one of the most important things that we see for sustaining this type of activity going forward. The value really clearly came through about the connection between the outside world and schools, and we know from working with some other schools that they see the value if we can help break down the barriers and make it easy for them to implement. So I think talking to the government, talking to exam providers about this, they are providers, the exam boards, about this stuff to see whether we can change the nature and content of BTECs and other exams would be one potential way forward to see things that are implemented.
We were talking about careers progression. It is very difficult to predict what careers will be out there, but what we were clear about is changing the pedagogical approach, really ensuring that IT became a big part of that learning, but not focusing on the IT itself, but focusing on the learning and the approach to learning, using IT as a tool, but at the same time enable young people to develop those skills. There was quite a difficult scenario when you think about how young people deal with IT outside the school scenario, and the issues. We had an example of bringing IT into the classroom and young people really engaging with it, and then closing it off and going back to what they did before. And we said, really, it's teachers who need to be supported and engaged and given permission to some extent to have that IT experience as perhaps more the norm for young people, so young people become engaged. And it's a social responsibility as well, as we were just saying, also saying earlier, to help young people learn how to use social networking sites, etc., in the real world as well as in school, and that way it becomes lifelong learning. And again, trying to envisage where the future's coming, it's really just enabling young people, perhaps even to co-construct the curriculum, and that way young people are bringing the outside world that they're experiencing here and now in, and supporting teachers perhaps more as facilitators of learning rather than the traditional holders of all the knowledge. And if we can get teachers to be cool about that and confident, and young people to be actively engaged, that partnership will move forward. And I think learning will benefit everybody, more fruitful.
I think future career, like with regards to the whole basis of today, which is how people's careers in the futures will be, jobs that we don't even know exist yet. How do we adapt, and how do we prepare young people who are potentially going to be candidates for this role, for roles that we don't know what they are? And we were discussing how we need closer relationships between industry and schools, and more emphasis on the importance of practical experience within industry for people from a young age, not a sandwich year when you're at university, because I think we all agree that's too late actually, and it needs to start from quite a young age. I think that the other thing with regards to IT, and coming back to what you were saying, is that we are using computers in our everyday life within work, and surely education should reflect what happens beyond education, what happens in a work environment. So why therefore isn't IT a constant overarching subject within schools? And again, that brings in industry and industry showing how they use IT, and then schools learning how to adapt their teaching to make sure that people are prepared for that.
One of the things we talked about in our group actually as well was about time, basically, in terms of the learning process, and because of the emphasis on equipping people to learn, enabling people to learn, enthusing young people to learn, because of what we're now looking at, which is a longer working life for people, in terms of, we're living longer, and now we're looking like we're going to have to work for a lot longer. And the issues that people have constantly discussed about, about how prematurely sometimes we're forced to make very specific vocational decisions. We talked very much about, stretching that time a bit more, having more engagement with the real world, with work, even to the point where out of necessity there might be a need for people to self-fund their own degrees. And examples of what we call the flexi degree, which is that it's a year long. It's not 3 years, it's 4 years, and you stretch it even further because you break it down, you spend time engaging in the real world, getting more valuable experiences. So that actually what we're doing is kind of pushing back some of the vocational decisions that are being made in school, pushing them back later, taking more time out, and hey, you know, if we're going to have to work until we're 80 and we're going to have to find another way to finance our degrees, well, maybe actually we don't finish our degree till we're 28 years old. But actually on the way to that, with, you know, particularly as children, we're learning to learn, developing enthusiasm to learn, and then actually closer to our 20s or in our 20s, we're thinking about actually what it is that we're actually going to do.